Humanity roared as one fear spread. Part 1. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from 43 different species sat in their designated sections, their various forms of bodies tense with fear. Some had multiple eyes that darted nervously. Others had sensory organs that pulsed with agitation. The air recyclers hummed in the silence, a sound that usually went unnoticed but now seemed deafening. High Counselor Vex Prime of the stood at the center podium. His crystalline body refracted the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice resonated through translation devices that rendered his words into dozens of languages simultaneously. "The have awakened," he said simply. The chamber erupted. Some species made sounds of distress. Others released pheromones of panic that their environmental suits couldn't fully contain. The delegates, massive beings bred for warfare over 10,000 years, slammed their armored fists against their stone benches. Even they looked afraid. Ambassador sat in the human section and watched. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5 feet tall, with streaks in her black hair. She had been Earth's voice in the Council for 3 years. In that time, she had learned that humanity was not respected here. They were tolerated, sometimes barely. "Order," Vex Prime's voice cut through the chaos. "We must discuss our options." General Thrax of the military command stood. He was 12 feet of bioengineered muscle and bone plating, a creature designed by his ancestors to be the perfect warrior. "We retreat to the core worlds," he announced. "We fortify. We abandon the outer colonies and consolidate our forces." "Abandon them," someone shouted. "Billions live in those colonies." "Billions who will die anyway if we spread our forces too thin," Thrax replied coldly. "This is not the first time they have awakened. Our historical records are clear. They consume everything in their path. Our only hope is to make ourselves too difficult to reach." A delegate rose, her translucent form shimmering. They were telepaths, able to link their thoughts across vast distances. "Perhaps we can negotiate," she suggested. "Every consciousness has desires. Every mind can be reasoned with." "They are not like you," Vex Prime said, and his tone carried something humans would recognize as deep old fear. "They do not negotiate. They do not stop. They consume biological matter and absorb it into their collective. They have already taken the Corvin colonies and the stations. 3 entire species have gone silent in the last month." The chamber fell quiet again, had read the reports. They were like nothing humanity had ever encountered. They traveled in swarms of organic ships, millions strong, moving through space like a plague. They had been dormant for 10,000 years, sleeping in the dark spaces between galaxies. Now they were awake and hungry. "We could flee to dark space," suggested a delegate from the Confederation. "Take our populations and hide in the void between spiral arms. They will eventually return to dormancy." "After consuming everything we've built over," Vex Prime replied. "But yes, that is an option. We could run and hope our species survive as refugees in the dark." Listen to proposal after proposal. Each one involved running, hiding, or sacrificing billions of lives to save trillions. She understood the mathematics. She understood why they thought this way, but something in her chest felt tight and hot. Finally, Vex Prime's crystalline eyes turned toward the human section. "Ambassador," he said, "humanity has been silent. What is Earth's position on this matter?" Every translator in the chamber shifted focus. 43 species turned their attention to the small human woman. Some looked curious. Most looked dismissive. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 50 years. They had 12 warships to the Council's thousands. Their technology was borrowed and cobbled together. They were children playing at galactic politics. She smoothed her jacket, a simple black garment that seemed plain compared to the elaborate coverings of other species. She walked to the speaker's platform, her footsteps echoing in the massive chamber. "We fight," she said. For a moment no one reacted. Then someone laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound from an officer. "Fight," General Thrax leaned forward. "Ambassador, I mean no disrespect, but humanity has 12 dreadnoughts. 12. The combined Council fleet has 7,000 warships, and we are discussing retreat. What exactly do you plan to fight with?" Looked at him steadily. "Everything." "Everything?" Vex Prime's voice carried what might have been amusement. "Ambassador, I understand that humanity is passionate, but this is not a matter of courage. This is mathematics. They outnumber us by orders of magnitude." "I understand the mathematics," replied. "I also understand something else. You're all talking about which populations to sacrifice, which colonies to abandon, which species are acceptable losses. You're already defeated because you've accepted that defeat is inevitable." "We're being realistic," a delegate said sharply. "No," said, and her voice cut across the chamber like a blade. "You're being afraid, and fear makes you weak." The delegate's form flickered with agitation. "Ambassador, we can sense your emotions. You are afraid too. We all feel it radiating from you." "Yes," agreed. "I'm terrified. But that's not the same thing. Fear can make you run, or it can make you fight harder than you ever thought possible. Humanity learned a long time ago that the only thing more dangerous than a species with nothing to lose is a species that refuses to lose." She touched a control on her wrist device. A hologram appeared above the podium showing human space, 50 star systems, hundreds of colonies, billions of people. "This is what we've built in 200 years of space travel," she said. "It's not much compared to your empires, but it's ours, and we will not give it up. Not to thee, not to anyone." "Sentiment will not stop an unstoppable force," Vex Prime said. "Maybe not," said, "but we're going to try. Earth is transmitting a message to all human colonies right now. We're calling everyone home, not to run, not to hide, to fight." "This is insanity," someone muttered. Smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. "Probably, but you know what I've learned about humanity. We're very good at insanity. Some of you have studied our history. You know what we did to each other before we reached the stars, the wars, the destruction. We nearly wiped ourselves out a dozen times." She gestured at the hologram. "But we didn't. And you know why? Because even when we were fighting each other, even when we were at our worst, we shared something. When someone or something threatens to exterminate us, we stop fighting each other and start fighting it. Together." The chamber was silent now. Continued, her voice steady. "You want to know humanity's position? Here it is. We're gathering our fleet at Epsilon Station. That's directly in this path. We're not running. We're not hiding. We're standing in their way. And if any of you want to join us, you're welcome. If you don't, that's fine too. Watch from your fortified worlds. Watch while humans show you what it looks like when prey decides it's done being prey." She turned and walked back to her seat. The chamber erupted in argument. Some called it suicide. Others called it inspiring. A few called it the ranting of a species too young to know when they were beaten. Admiral Sarah received the transmission in her ready room aboard the UHNS Defiance, humanity's flagship. She was a tall woman with dark skin and sharp eyes that had seen too many years of peacekeeping operations in the outer colonies. The message from Earth was brief and clear. She read it 3 times, then called her command staff. "Change of orders," she announced. "We're going to Epsilon Station. Send word to every human ship within communication range. Military, civilian, whatever they've got. If it flies and has a human crew, I want it at Epsilon." Her tactical officer, Commander Park, looked uncertain. "Admiral, most of those ships aren't combat rated. We'd be asking civilian vessels to enter a war zone." "I'm not asking," said quietly. "I'm offering. Every ship that comes does so by choice, but they need to know they have a choice. They can run or they can fight. Send the message." The message went out across 50 star systems. It traveled by quantum relay, by courier ships, by every means humanity had developed. The words were simple. They think we'll run, they think we'll hide, they think fear will divide us. Show them what humans do when cornered, show them what we are. On the mining colony of New Terra, Captain James sat in his cargo hauler's cockpit and stared at the message. His ship, the Maria's Hope, was designed to move ore, not fight wars. He had a crew of 8. None of them were soldiers. He called them together in the common area. "You've all seen the message," he said. "We're 3 days from Epsilon if we burn hard, or we can head deeper into colonized space, try to get behind the defense lines they're going to set up." "What are you going to do?" his engineer asked. Thought about his daughter on Earth, about his wife buried on New Terra after a mining accident 5 years ago, about the life he'd built out here in the dark. "I'm going to Epsilon," he said. "Anyone who wants to come with me is welcome. Anyone who wants to take a shuttle and head the other way, I understand. No judgment." His crew looked at each other. Then one by one they nodded. "We're with you," his engineer said. "All of us." Similar scenes played out across human space. Colony ships altered their courses. Science vessels suspended their research. Even the generation ships, massive vessels traveling between distant stars, began to turn. They were too slow to reach Epsilon in time, but they sent messages of support that traveled faster than they could. Epsilon Station had been a small refueling depot, a stopping point for ships traveling the outer routes. When the first vessels began arriving, there were barely 300 people staffed there. Within a week, there were thousands. Within 2 weeks, over 100,000. Admiral watched the fleet assemble from the Defiance's observation deck. They came in every shape and size. Sleek military cruisers, blocky cargo haulers with welded armor plating, luxury yachts that had been retrofitted with mining ships covered in reactive plating, even a few colony vessels, massive and slow, positioning themselves as mobile shields. "It's not a fleet," Commander Park said softly. "It's a migration." "It's humanity," replied. "Count them." 347 ships so far, Park reported. And more are coming every hour. "Admiral, most of these vessels have no business in a battle zone. We have families on some of those ships. Children." "I know," said. "Get me a channel to the fleet, all ships." When the channel opened, she spoke clearly. "This is Admiral to all vessels assembling at Epsilon. I won't lie to you. What's coming will be the hardest fight humanity has ever faced. They have destroyed civilizations that had millions of years to prepare. Most of the galaxy thinks we're committing suicide by being here." She paused, looking out at the growing fleet. "Maybe they're right. Maybe we can't win. But I know one thing for certain. If we run, if we hide, if we let fear make us scatter, then we've already lost. Not just this battle. We've lost what makes us human. We've lost the thing that brought us from caves to stars." She took a breath. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to stand here and show what it means to threaten humanity. We're going to stand here and show the galaxy what we are. And if we die together, fighting. That's a better end than dying alone and afraid in the dark." The response came in waves. Ships signaled their acknowledgement. Some played music over open channels. Others transmitted simple messages. "We stand with you. For Earth. For humanity." On the Galactic Council's observation stations, analysts watched the human fleet gather. They ran simulations. They calculated probabilities. Every model said the same thing. The humans would be slaughtered. General Thrax watched the feed from his command ship, far behind the lines. He had seen countless battles in his long life. He had studied military history across 100 species. What he was watching made no sense. "They're children," one of his officers said. "They don't understand what's coming." But Thrax wasn't so sure. He had read human history. He had seen what they did to each other in their wars. He had seen the footage from their atomic age when they came close to destroying their own world and chose not to. "Maybe," he said quietly, "or maybe we're the ones who don't understand." The swarm was 10 days out from Epsilon Station. Long-range sensors showed them coming like a dark tide, millions of organic vessels moving in perfect synchronization. They had consumed everything in their path. Nothing had slowed them. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the tactical display. Her fleet had grown to 847 ships, against millions. "All ships," she transmitted, "this is it. In 10 days we make our stand. Check your weapons, check your crews, check your courage, and remember something. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who thinks we can't win. We're fighting to prove that humanity doesn't give up. Ever." She closed the channel and looked at her command crew. They were young, most of them, too young to die, but they weren't running. "Admiral," Commander Park said quietly, "even if we hurt them, even if we make them pay, they're going to kill us all." Nodded, "Probably, but they're going to know they were in a fight. They're going to remember the day they met humanity, and every species watching is going to see what we did here. They're going to see that someone finally stood and fought back." She smiled grimly. "Let them remember us. Let them tell stories about the species that roared instead of whimpered. Let them know that humanity was here, and we did not go quietly." 10 days until they arrived. 10 days until humanity proved what it was made of. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in recorded history, they were going to face an enemy that refused to run. Part 2. The swarm appeared on long-range sensors exactly when predicted. They moved through space like a living thing, millions of organic vessels pulsing with bioluminescence. From a distance, they looked almost beautiful, like a school of fish moving through dark water. But every species that had encountered them knew the truth. They were death in its form. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched the display. The enemy outnumbered her fleet by thousands to one. The mathematics were impossible, but mathematics had never stopped humanity before. "All ships battle stations," she ordered. "Commence final preparations." Across the human fleet, ships moved into position. It wasn't a formation that any military academy would recognize. The civilian vessels, hundreds of them, formed an outer shell. Inside that shell, the military ships arranged themselves in clusters. Behind everything, the slowest vessels, the generation ships and colony transports, positioned themselves like anchors. Commander Park studied the arrangement and shook his head. "Admiral, this formation makes no tactical sense. We're putting our weakest ships on the front line." "I know," said, "that's the point, trust me." On the mining hauler Maria's Hope, Captain checked his crew's readiness. They had spent the last 10 days welding armor plates to the hull and mounting industrial cutting lasers and improvised turrets. It wasn't military hardware, but it was what they had. "Everyone sealed up?" he asked over the internal comm. His crew reported in one by one. They were miners and engineers, not soldiers, but they knew how to work under pressure. They knew how to survive in the black. "Good," said. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to slow them down, make them work for every meter, make them remember us." Similar conversations were happening across the civilian fleet. Yacht owners who had mounted missile pods on luxury vessels. Freight captains who had packed their cargo holds with improvised explosives. Scientists who had converted their research equipment into weapons. The Galactic Council observers watched from their safe positions, light years away. Their sensors recorded everything. Their analysts tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "The human formation is chaotic," one analyst reported. "They appear to have no unified tactical doctrine. Some ships are broadcasting music. Others are transmitting what appear to be personal messages to loved ones." General Thrax listened from his command ship. Something bothered him about this. He had studied humanity's wars. They were brutal fighters when cornered, but they weren't stupid. This seemed like suicide. "What kind of music?" he asked. "Various forms, war anthems from their tribal past, religious songs, something they call rock and roll. The transmissions are on every frequency. It's creating significant electromagnetic interference. Thrax felt something click in his mind. They're jamming. Sorry. The coordinate through a form of organic telepathy. We've documented it. They share information across the swarm instantly. But the humans are flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with noise. Emotional, chaotic noise. The analyst's crystalline body pulsed with realization. They're trying to disrupt this coordination. It won't work, another officer said. This communication is biological, not electronic. But Thrax wasn't so sure. They used telepathy too, and they had reported difficulty near human populations. Something about human thoughts was loud, chaotic, unpredictable, maybe loud enough to cause interference. The swarm closed to weapons range. They didn't slow. They didn't pause. They simply came on like a wave, ready to crash over the human fleet and consume it. Admiral watched them come. Her hands were steady on the command console. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. All civilian vessels, she transmitted, execute Plan Delta. The outer shell of civilian ships suddenly accelerated. Hundreds of vessels, never designed for combat, burned their engines at full power directly toward the swarm. On the Galactic Council observation stations, analysts gasped. They're charging. The civilian vessels are charging directly into the enemy formation. It's suicide, someone whispered. But General Thrax watched more carefully. The civilian ships weren't attacking randomly. They were targeting specific points in the formation, creating gaps, forcing the swarm to adjust. They responded as they always had. They surrounded the human ships and began to tear them apart with organic weapons. Bioplasma burned through hulls. Acid sprays ate through armor. The civilian vessels died quickly. But as they died, they released their payloads. Felt the Maria's hope shudder as weapons hit the hull. Alarms screamed. The air filled with smoke. Now, he shouted. His engineer triggered the release mechanism. The cargo hold doors blew open, and everything they'd loaded poured out into space. Industrial explosives, fusion reactor cores set to overload, chemical compounds that would burn in vacuum when exposed to this organic materials. Abandon ship, ordered. His crew scrambled for the escape pods. They launched just as the Maria's Hope exploded, taking a dozen vessels with it. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated hundreds of times. Civilian ships died, but they died on their terms, taking enemies with them. The swarm found itself moving through a field of explosions and debris. All military vessels transmitted. Execute Plan Echo through the gaps. The military ships, which had been holding back, suddenly surged forward. They moved through the holes the civilian ships had created, firing as they went. Human missiles and tore into the formation. They tried to adapt, but something was wrong. Their usual coordination was stuttering. Ships that should have moved as one were responding with slight delays. The human jamming, the emotional noise flooding every frequency, was having an effect. Commander Park monitored the tactical display. Admiral, we're losing ships fast. At this rate, we'll be gone in an hour. I know, said. How many have we killed? Estimated 3,000 vessels destroyed or disabled. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Studied the display, looking for weaknesses. The swarm had structure. At the center of each major formation were larger vessels, what human analysts had designated as hive nodes. They coordinated the smaller ships around them. Target the nodes, she ordered. All ships, concentrate fire on the large vessels at the center of each formation. The human fleet adjusted. It cost them. Weapons tore through ship after ship. The Defiance's shields were already down to 60%, but the humans kept firing, kept pushing. One of the hive nodes exploded, then another. General Thrax watched from his observation position. The formation is destabilizing. The humans found the coordination points. "It won't be enough," his tactical officer said. "They're still outnumbered 1,000 to 1." But something was changing. Those which had never hesitated in recorded history were slowing, not retreating but adapting more carefully. They were encountering something they hadn't faced before, resistance that hurt them. On Earth, billions watched the battle feed. In human colonies across 50 star systems, people watched. In homes and bars and public squares, they watched their fleet die. And they started singing. It began in Sydney in a bar full of dockworkers. Someone started singing an old war song from humanity's past. Others joined. Within minutes, the whole bar was singing. Someone transmitted it to orbit. The orbital stations picked it up. It spread. On Mars, they sang. On Europa's ice cities, they sang. In the mining colonies of the asteroid belt, they sang. Within an hour, billions of human voices were singing together, and the combined transmission was so powerful that ships across the galaxy picked it up. The observers, with their telepathic sensitivity, recoiled from the psychic weight of it. It wasn't just sound. It was emotion given form, grief for the dying, rage at the enemy, pride in the resistance, hope against hope. A scholar would later describe it as the scream of a species that refuses to end quietly. They felt it too. They were telepathic in their own way, and the wave of human emotion hit them like a physical force. For the first time in their ancient existence, they felt something new. They felt fear. Admiral saw the change in the tactical display. The advance had stopped. They were hovering at the edge of weapons range, adjusting their formation. "They're hesitating," Commander Park said in disbelief. "They're actually hesitating." Felt something fierce bloom in her chest. "All ships, full assault, every weapon, hit them with everything we have." The human fleet, now down to less than 300 ships, charged forward. They were battered, bleeding, but they weren't done. The Defiance led the way, stood at the center of her bridge and watched her tactical officer coordinate firing solutions. Rounds, missiles, energy weapons, everything humanity had developed in 200 years of poured into the enemy. They fought back. Ship after ship on both sides exploded. The space around Epsilon Station became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic matter. But the humans were learning. Every minute of combat taught them something new. This organic armor was vulnerable to sustained thermal weapons. Their coordination could be disrupted by electromagnetic pulses. Their hive nodes could be identified by their energy signatures. Across the human fleet, information spread instantly. A discovery by a mining crew was being used by military vessels within seconds. A tactic developed by a yacht captain was being deployed fleet-wide. The chaotic, uncoordinated human force was adapting faster than the ancient, unified swarm. In his command ship, General Thrax watched in growing amazement. "They're learning. In the middle of combat, they're learning and adapting. I've never seen coordination like this without a hive mind." "Should we intervene?" his tactical officer asked. "Should we send our forces?" Thrax hesitated. His orders were to observe. But watching these humans fight, watching them die by the thousands but never stop, something stirred in him. His species had been bred for war. They were supposed to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy. But he had never seen warriors like this. "Send a message to the Council," he said quietly. "Tell them we're moving to support the human fleet." "Sir, our orders." "I'm changing our orders," Thrax growled. "The humans need help, and by the ancestors we're going to give it to them." The fleet, 200 of the galaxy's most powerful warships, changed course. They would arrive in 6 hours. It might be too late, but they were coming. On the Defiance's bridge, alarms screamed. A vessel 3 times the ship's size was closing fast. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered. But the Defiance was too slow, too damaged. The ship's weapons charged, bioplasma glowing with deadly light. Then the colonial transport Endless Horizon, one of the slow, massive generation ships, moved into the line of fire. It was a ship designed to carry 10,000 people across the stars over decades. Now it carried only a skeleton crew of volunteers. The bioplasma hit the endless horizon shields. They held for 5 seconds. Then they failed. The plasma burned through the hull, tearing the massive ship apart. But 5 seconds was enough. The Defiance's weapons officer locked onto the vessel and fired. Every weapon on the ship discharged simultaneously. The enemy vessel shuddered, its organic hull rupturing, and then it exploded. "The horizon is gone," Commander Park reported, his voice hollow. 300 crew all dead. Closed her eyes for a moment. 300 people had just died to save her ship. 300 people who could have run, who could have hidden, who chose to be here. "Make it count," she whispered. Then louder to her crew, "Make every second they bought us count. Keep firing." The battle raged for 12 hours. The human fleet, what remained of it, fought like cornered animals. No, that wasn't right. Animals gave up when beaten. Humans didn't. When their weapons ran dry, they rammed. When their engines failed, they used emergency thrusters to position themselves as obstacles. When their ships were breached, crews in environment suits continued fighting with handheld weapons through the holes in their hulls. They had consumed civilizations across countless. They had faced countless forms of resistance, but they had never faced this. They had never met a species that treated death as an obstacle to be overcome rather than an end to be avoided. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Not because the humans were winning in numbers. They weren't. For every vessel destroyed, 10 human ships died, but they were starting to retreat, not fleeing but pulling back, reassessing. They had come to consume. They had found something that consumed their resolve instead. Admiral stood on what remained of the Defiance's bridge. Half her crew was dead. The ship was held together by emergency force fields and prayer, but her weapons still worked. "Status report," she demanded. 123 ships remaining combat effective, Park reported. 70 more are damaged but still mobile. We've destroyed an estimated 15,000 vessels. 15,000 out of millions, but they had stopped advancing. "They're regrouping," the tactical officer reported, "pulling back to long range." "Don't let them," said. "If they regroup, they'll overwhelm us. All ships pursue, don't let them breathe." "Admiral, we're barely holding together." "Then we die attacking instead of defending," interrupted. "All ships full pursuit. We end this here or we don't end it at all." The human fleet, battered and broken, charged after the retreating. Behind them, Epsilon Station was a ruin. Around them, the debris of 800 ships floated in the dark. But ahead of them, they were running. For the first time in recorded history, they were running. And across the galaxy, every species watching understood what they were seeing. Humanity had done the impossible. They had made the unstoppable stop. They had made the fearless fear. The battle wasn't over, but the message was sent. Humanity roared, and the universe heard it. Part 3. The pursuit lasted 3 days. The human fleet, now down to 97 combat-capable ships, chased the swarm through deep space. They were like wolves running down prey that had never been hunted before. Every hour brought more combat. Every hour cost more ships. But the humans didn't stop. Admiral barely slept. Her bridge crew rotated in shifts, but she remained at her station, watching the tactical displays, coordinating the scattered fleet. The Defiance was held together with emergency repairs and the skill of an engineering team working miracles. "They're heading toward the nebula," Commander Park reported. "If they reach the gas clouds, we'll lose them on sensors." "Then we catch them before they get there," said. "All ships, maximum burn, we end this." On what remained of the human vessels, exhausted crews pushed their engines beyond safe limits. They had come too far, lost too much, to let the escape. Captain floated in his escape pod with 7 other survivors from the Maria's Hope. They had been picked up by a military destroyer, the UHNS Relentless, which had lost half its crew. Now and his miners were manning weapons stations they had never been trained for. "Lock onto that cluster of vessels," the Relentless's executive officer ordered. "Fire when ready." His hands moved across the unfamiliar controls. The targeting system chirped. He pressed the firing button. Missiles streaked into space, tracking the ships. 3 explosions bloomed in the dark. "Good shooting," the executive officer said. Thought about his crew members who hadn't made it to the escape pods. About the Maria's Hope, his home for 15 years, now debris scattered across light years. About his daughter on Earth, watching this battle on the news feeds. "For the ones who didn't make it," he said quietly and fired again. Back on Earth, humanity watched. The streets were empty. Everyone was inside, watching the feeds. The battle had been streaming live for days now. People had seen their fleet reduced from 800 ships to less than 100. They had watched thousands of their own die in the black. And they kept singing. The song had changed now. It wasn't war anthems anymore. It was something older, deeper. Lullabies that human mothers had sung for thousands of years. Songs of grief and remembrance. Songs that spoke of loss but also of continuation. Songs that said, "We are still here." The combined transmission of billions of voices reached across space. The observers had stopped trying to filter it out. Some of them were listening, trying to understand how a species so fragmented could unite so completely. "They're not a hive mind," one scholar reported to the Galactic Council. "Each human is an individual with their own thoughts, their own fears, their own desires. But when threatened, they synchronize. Not by losing their individuality, but by choosing to act as one. I've never encountered anything like it." General Thrax and the fleet had finally caught up to the battle. His 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the combat zone. What he saw stunned him. The human fleet was tiny, barely 100 ships, most of them damaged, but they were pressing the attack against a swarm that still numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It should have been impossible. It was impossible. But the humans were doing it anyway. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "should we engage?" Thrax watched a human destroyer, trailing atmosphere and fire, ram itself into a hive node. Both vessels exploded. The human crew never hesitated. "Yes," he said quietly. "Yes, we engage. And let history remember that the fought beside humanity when it mattered. All ships weapons free. Support the human fleet." The warships entered the battle. They were larger than human vessels, more heavily armed, designed by generations of military engineering. Their weapons were devastating, but even they were careful to follow the human fleet's tactics, adapting to the strategies that had been working. Admiral saw the new contacts on her display. For a moment she couldn't believe it. Warships, 200 of them. "Incoming transmission from the fleet," her communications officer reported. "Put it through." General Thrax's voice came over the channel. "Admiral, this is General Thrax of the Expeditionary Force. We're here to support your fleet. What are your orders?" Felt something catch in her throat. Orders. He was asking her for orders. "General," she said, "we're pursuing the swarm into